Today is the third day of the January 89 7-day retreat. Going back to something that was said during the first talk, about passing on anger, frustration, exasperation, or punitive measures suffered ourselves onto our children. This endless chain of passing on unconsciously what has so often become unconscious, one's own pain or humiliation, need for vendetta or revenge onto another, and very often it's the children. The question came up, can that end? Can there be freedom from that? Because if there cannot, it goes on endlessly. And one person asked, isn't there something that is being passed on from parent to child? After all, that's what the relationship is. And I forget the verbatim interchange that took place. One has to teach something to the child. Show it something. And in looking at it together and since, and for a long time this question has occupied my mind seriously. What are we teaching our children? The idea is there. We have to teach our children. We have to educate them. We have to raise them. But what are we doing? And what is happening? Is what we think is happening actually happening? We think we're teaching something, but what is the child learning? And we were talking in that connection with observing a little 2-year-old child imitating practically everything that she was aware of, and she was awake while she was awake. There's no sleepiness during waking time. Repeating, doing, wanting the same cup on her high chair tray as the people had at the table. Not a baby cup, the same spoon. And feeding herself, doing things herself. A tremendous struggle with these helpful adults. Maya do herself, she'd say. She needed to do it by herself, and she was even, Kyle and I marveled at it, she was practicing. She'd sit there, try to get those tights on, and very difficult to get tights on. The wrong leg, or starting with a leg rather than with the upper part, and yet refusing all help. This immense urge to be independent, to do things herself and to imitate. We were talking about saying things that she had heard which she couldn't possibly understand the meaning of, just repeating sentences and inflections. Amplitude of the voice, trying to imitate all of that. So the stage is all set, it's all given. A child will imitate what an adult does. What do we have to teach? So many parents, so many of us parents, I remember how it was when we had a child. Feel you have to teach your child to share, not to be selfish, but who are we as teachers? Are we selfless? Do we share? So often a little child will grab something and a parent will say, "Leave that alone, that's mine. That's not for you, don't you touch it." And I heard this little child say precisely that to a smaller child when she was getting one of her toys. Why it can't be touched, why this particular thing is off limits to child's hands, the child doesn't understand. So, can that be explained in non-punitive, non-angry, non-possessive terms? Not because it's mine, but because something could happen to it. And a child will watch the adult's eyes, not just hear the words, but watch. And if a child discerns that there is some danger, it will usually go along. If there's some relationship of trust there, that the child has not been felt tricked by the adult. Say no today and tomorrow it's not no. Or yes today and tomorrow it's no. Then there's not to be trusted, and one just goes with one's own wants and cannot rely on what is being said. The thing of sharing is very interesting. Our grandson Ben asked me to go to the school and play wall ball with him. He had just gotten a new wall ball and wanted to try that out. I don't know whether you know wall ball, it's sort of an alternating, hitting the wall and then it comes back. But it has to do with a playing field too. I didn't know about that. And what happened was that Ben bounced that ball back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, as though I didn't exist. And all kind of feelings came up about that. Annoyance and wanting to say all kinds of stuff. What do you ask me to come here for if you're playing by yourself? Stop. The way it comes up and maybe comes out is amazing with a little child. Then it occurred to me here to have this bigger person stand there while he was getting the ball all the time. There was some fun in there, some pleasure. He's a very small child. Maybe that's what happens to him. Bigger kids catching that ball before he can get it, and now doing this. I felt my presence there was not lost on him. It had some kind of a function, don't quite know what. So, and after dropping all the thoughts and emotions that had been aroused by being left out, I just waited. And after a considerable amount of time, he began to make a field into the snow with his heel. And he said, "Look, if the ball falls into here, it's yours. If it falls into here, it's mine." And we played from then on. And it was a beautiful thing that after going through something and not suffering the violent or forceful interference of an adult, something very natural happened, which doesn't need to be taught and doesn't need to be learned, because it's fun playing together. There's an innate joy in that. Two people playing together with a ball. So, and this is what we came to with the woman who was bringing this question up in the meeting. Can one be observant? Not just this moment, but what has been going on all along with the child and in one's relationship. And if one needs to talk and point things out, not do it angrily or punitively, but allow the situation to help, to support what is being said. Children are not dumb. They're often more alert than the adults. They have noticed more things that have been going on maybe than the adult. Obviously, there are times when something has to happen abruptly. The person told me, what if the school bus stops in front and she doesn't want to get ready? It's a very difficult situation. Does one carry a child physically, drag her to the bus? She doesn't want to go. Can one make a question out of it and look at it in the course of the day, in the course of the morning? What preceded getting ready for the school bus? Was one ready oneself early? But have a minimum of anger and force applied. All right, you say, well, one gets angry and exasperated. Yes, one does. And then one uses force on the child. But not to kid oneself that the child is just learning punctuality for a school bus. It learns that a bigger person can use force effectively. And that will be practiced on a smaller person by that child. Because there's no wound we receive of pain, humiliation, anger, or whatever that doesn't remain unfinished business and wants its just due. It can be observed everywhere, in ourselves and in others, and in the little children. Also, if one has gotten angry or punitive, one's own conditioning taking over as it does, and later on one comes to reflects upon it, can one share that with the child? That was unheard of when I grew up, that my parents would have ever said, I'm sorry, I talked like that. That was not appropriate. It would have been impossible. My parents were always right. And they were untouchable by criticism. If we ever did it, we heard about it. So can one talk with the child on an equal level, because we are also children? Share our difficulties. One can say, well, a little child doesn't understand. Some things a little child does not understand. But it's amazing the amount of understanding that's there when one doesn't talk down to them or use force and feels that same level. Then both hearts open up to each other. I want to see whether we can talk a bit this morning about understanding thought and image, and what it does to the whole body, to our relationship with each other, to our international relationship. It always comes up because people do want to get experience by coming to a retreat, get an experience of more awareness or sensory awareness or peace, quiet, the experience of exquisite stillness and quiet. One has had it before and one is trying to recapture it because that seems the most worthwhile thing that could happen in a retreat like this, to come to this exquisite moment of stillness, or maybe a feeling of no separation, loss of boundaries, as one person called it. And yet, as we have talked about from day one, or maybe the night before, does one understand what is going on in this mind? If that isn't understood from moment to moment, we deceive ourselves. And we deceive each other. One person brought up this question in a meeting. How do I know? How did he put it? That you don't lead me astray, or that you don't lead us astray. And it's a good question to ask of oneself whenever one listens to anybody, including oneself. Because if one cannot tell what is happening to one, then one will be led astray. Because we always want and fear. We want security, we fear loneliness, abandonment, or pain. And anyone who promises to alleviate that or to find a way out will be followed, particularly if this person demands following methods or beliefs. So how will one tell that one is not being led astray, or that what is being said is actually so? For that, an experience of no division or of full sensory awareness is not sufficient. Particularly since the experience feels so good, one makes a memory out of it and then cherishes that memory. If one can't recapture the state, one at least can bring up the memory. And the amazing way our thoughts and physical feelings or organism are wired is that a thought can bring about almost as good feelings as the real situation itself, the real experience. Memory is extremely powerful and can be addictive if it isn't seen as memory, and the addiction isn't noticed, isn't felt and understood. We think we have to break our addictions to alcohol or nicotine. And we go through things, periods of withdrawal and whatever methods are used. But there is a host of addictions to our thoughts and memories, to the feelings that they evoke throughout the organism. And can one trace that? See it for oneself so that no one has to convince one. And one doesn't need to believe it, one can see it as it happens. So what is thought? Where does it come from? One has been watching, getting glimpses of what goes on in the mind. It can become very clear that thought is inevitably linked with memory. It is memory. Please challenge it in a meeting. We'll go through this thing time and time again with never-ending zeal, enthusiasm, energy, joy. I love to look at things freshly. You're never boring me by bringing up a question, even though it has been brought up I don't know how many times. It's always new if we approach it without remembering what we already figured out once before. We'll look at it now. That the thought there is a J out there is a memory. If I'd never seen a J before and heard the word in close association with this particular sight and sound, that thought wouldn't come. If I'd never seen sunshine before and had the memory of sunshine and the memory of the word sunshine and all the associations with it, that thought wouldn't come up. Past experiences, and if the experience is a second ago, become memory. And then that memory translates itself into thoughts. But it itself can also be called a thought. We're using the word thought very broadly to encompass also imagery, pictures, fantasy. And one could even include, if it wasn't at times confusing, the feelings and emotions that thoughts elicit, because it's all one interconnected, inseparable process. Sometimes people say to me, you put so much emphasis on thought, but there's a time in our life, early childhood, maybe prenatal, when there were experiences and impressions, but there were no words. There's nothing verbal. Well, then the memory is non-verbal, but it's still a memory that is connected with feelings and emotions. Fear or craving, anxiety, anger. So can one test that out for oneself, evoking a memory and the thoughts that come from it immediately? Evoke the memory of someone one loves dearly and good thoughts, good feelings being aroused in the system. Or evoking the memory of someone one doesn't like, one has been angry about, or maybe still carries a grudge about. And just thinking of that person and what he did or she did can get the whole organism riled up in anger. A person in a retreat once told me, it was so real, the anger felt about this person who did something to her 5 years ago, that in the middle of the retreat she went to her room, packed up, and was ready to leave and see that person, give him a piece of her mind. Finally, maybe it was a cold day and stepping outside, something brought her to, wondering what was going on. So the power of thought as memory must be seen and felt, not just be the recipient or the passive puppet of that, but see that it is happening, that it's taking place. And the quicker it's seen, the less does this anger or rage or fear have a chance of sprouting and flowering into more and more and more thoughts about what could happen or what did happen, and more feelings. The later it is seen, the more stuff is there that is now taking its time to abate. the instant an anger-provoking thought comes up, if it is seen at the instant it comes up, it may not even evoke all the stuff, if attention is there before the connection is made. Usually it is not, so the connection is made. And there are all the physical symptoms we've so often talked about. The power of memory, the power of words we've been talking about in these two talks. A word like Christianity or Buddhism, Judaism, America or American freedom, which has been talked about so prolifically during the last 2 years of campaigning for presidency. The word communism, or for Palestinians, the word Jew for Jews, the word Palestinian, the word homeland. My country, my flag, my religion, my Savior. The power of those words. Because there's identity with them. Identity meaning, that's me, it's my flag, it's me. And if it is being attacked or denigrated, then I am attacked. My religion, my Buddhism, my Christianity, or my Judaism. That's the power of the thought and word to separate us from each other as what we identify with, as what we are, what we think we are. And the power of thought to think I am a Buddhist, a Christian, an American, a German, and what goes with that. One has to really appreciate that, to get some glimpse of understanding of what we're doing to each other, killing each other, bombing each other, killing each other's wives and children, husbands and sons and fathers. Because of the power of the thought and the word and the memory of my country, 'tis of thee. My country above all else, and millions of people slain. For that thought, that memory, that word, and the music that goes with it, the symbols that are evoked. In this country, it's balloons, has been balloons. Balloons going up behind or in front of a flag, everything draped around a person. Balloons, the symbol of no problems, a picnic, good times. If you vote for me, things will be all right. You don't have to worry. You don't have to think about what's going on. Sometimes people say, you seem to feel pretty passionate about this, don't you? Don't you? Don't we need to understand what we do to ourselves and what words, pictures, symbols, tone of voice can do to us? To follow in blind belief and do things that are asked of us. We would never do if we thought clearly for ourselves without being under the addictive influence of symbols. That would be a new hospital treatment to cure us of the addictive influence of symbols. One person brought this up. In a previous retreat, this person had wondered about why she's here, what is she doing here, not really knowing what she came for exactly. And then mentioning this morning, I've noticed as thoughts come up, how quickly I say, this is a bad thought, that's a bad thought, this is not so bad. This one I mustn't think. Mustn't think about food, mustn't about work. I don't want to think about work. And then it occurred to her, who is judging that? And on the basis of what is one judging right and wrong? In terms of what? I don't even know what I want. So can little by little or lots by lots, everything be questioned? And not continue with something that is under questioning. If thought of food comes up, can one look how the thought of food, particularly when one is hungry, can make the mouth water and the stomach gurgle. And one just wants to eat. And so one, since the table isn't set yet, bell hasn't rung, one imagines eating and gets vicarious pleasure out of that. It's important to see how this works. It's going on all the time, but we're not aware of it. We're in it. We're absorbed in our fantasies, and therefore they seem real. But to have awareness of a thought of food and what it does to the body, apart from, like this person observed, immediately rejecting it as being a bad thought, how quickly judgment comes up. It appears as though nothing could separate judgment from a thought coming up or seeing something. As though the perception and judgment seem simultaneous, doesn't it? I like it, I don't like it. It isn't quite simultaneous. Can't be. Thought arising from memory or something perceived takes some time before cortex or wherever interpretation and reaction is stored, before that starts firing, connecting. So one can question whether there has to be judgment. Not it shouldn't be, or it's bad. Judging the judgment. A person said that too. I find myself judging that I'm judging. So what will wipe the slate clean? Is that possible? That there is a pure perception without immediately judging? Because it's quite clear that the immediate judgment blurs out or distorts the perception. One cannot see anything if one has already judged it. Can one find that out and see the truth of that? That judgment, reaction, bringing up what one knows about someone or something, distorts or blurs or contracts the perception. And does one want to see what is really there, what a person is like this moment? Then even though the memory of what he did or she did to me, even though that comes up, can it be seen but not interfere? It can be put aside if there's really an urgency to be in touch now, regardless of what happened in the past. This takes an intelligent insight into how the mind-body operates. Seeing the person, the memory coming up of what he did, seeing that that memory is partial and may not hold for now, and it will interfere with perceiving what's there now in our relationship, listening to this person freshly. This can happen just as quickly as judgment comes up. Seeing that it is a judgment, seeing that it is thoughts, and clearing it. And listening afresh. And as an aside, the beauty of doing this work, of attending, looking, giving one's energy to awareness, this moment, what happens is that old memories are blotted out. Maybe not completely or immediately, but one may find, and all people who've been doing this over any length of time say, something is happening to my memory. I don't seem to remember quite as well. Because the things that one needs to remember, one will remember. One may write it down. But particularly grudges aren't, the brain doesn't hold them as it used to. One may see a person who did something a while ago, one may not even think about it, remember it. That's the marvelous thing about doing this thing of looking, investigating, attending, giving one's energy to attending. So will one investigate the power of thought to divide, to isolate one. The moment I think I am this, and there is this addictive attachment to the thought of what I am, good, great, or no good, I'm immediately, instantly isolated from others. Because I'm either better than others or worse than others. Whether it is through my belonging to a religion or nationality group, or just some characteristics, being more talented or less talented. And the way we've been raised and unconsciously raise our children, we've always been told what we are, how good we are at this, or how poor. So there crystallizes an idea or multitudes of ideas and images about ourselves in which we believe. And we live up to them. It's a sort of self-fulfilling. The image being there, we sort of become a slave to it, live up to it or down to it. And then we wonder, why do we feel so separate from each other, out of touch, lonesome? And yet we cling to our identities, including the identity of being a loner. Can be a great identity. One is something. But it's the power of the image that keeps us imprisoned in that. What we really are, we don't. All we know is what people have told us, the images we've nurtured, and all keep them all like old portraits hanging in an old-fashioned room. But we're not the image. We're not what somebody told us we were. Maybe at the moment we did something that elicited this response. But that's not all of us. I don't know what all of us is. I don't know what all of anybody is, or all of myself. It changes all the time, depending on the circumstances and conditions and weather, and we're not separate from this whole completely ever-changing universe. We're part of that. Why encapsulate ourselves in ideas about ourselves and each other? Can one question that fundamentally and begin observing fundamentally when this occurs? I am this, catch it, see what feelings go with it. One person told me on the first day, on the first meeting. Incidentally, I did not say in the opening talk or in the first talk, because I assumed everybody had heard this before. But I will say it now anyways. Questions that people bring up form the essence of what we're talking. This is where we're starting from, to explore what is brought up in meetings. So everyone here is participant. But I do not remember verbatim what someone said and may not quote it properly. Doesn't mean that at the time it was said it wasn't listened to. Also, sometimes people say similar things and maybe a merged question emerges, which combines elements of several people saying the same thing in slightly different ways. So please don't feel misquoted or misunderstood. And I hope no one minds that questions that they brought up are being used. Try not to reveal who this person was. So, this is what was said in a first meeting. The few times that I have come to retreat a while ago, I did see things about self-image, and also in my daily life, some things dropped off. There was some dropping of things that had given me problems and complications. But then an anxiety arose about going further, about going deeper. An anxiety that there may be no excitement left if everything was unveiled or discovered. Maybe I would not feel the excitement to do the things that I'm doing now. Also a general apprehension about what would happen if the self was revealed to be nothing but thought and image. Can one live without a self? That's a scary thought, this person said. And I didn't want to get into that at all. How interested is one in this work of discovering the truth of everything, including oneself, and this wholeness of life? Is the interest kindled by hope for an experience that one has already read about or heard about? Then that's nothing new. It's just approaching something that one already knows. and one can have experiences, but it's never enough. Always needs more of it. But as we've said many times, we're not promising or propagandizing experiences here, but wondering together, what is the truth of this moment? Can that be seen directly, without knowing it beforehand, without already having an idea of what it could be or should be in my mind? Because then there is no way of discovering truth. Then all I'll discover is what I already know and project. And is one willing or ready to work on this one's whole life? Or is one giving it a retreat or a year of retreats or whatever period sometimes one sets for oneself? I'll give it that much of a try, and which is already putting a limit around it. But discovering about ourselves and our relationship with each other and with the nature all around us, the ground and the sky and the water flowing or frozen, that's a whole lifetime. By which I don't mean something that can safely be postponed. It's discovery is always now. Can't be postponed for the future. Then can one see what the mind is doing, what postponement is in terms of thought and trying to avoid anxiety about looking now. What's anxiety? Can one be with it, live with it? Not shove it aside or try to escape from it or drown it out. But without calling it anxiety, just be that. And not know what it is and therefore be in touch with it. Living with it, whatever it may do, and seeing what thoughts and images nourish it, keep it going. Thoughts and images from the past, projecting a future, what is going to happen to me. That's what is the food of anxiety. Without that, it cannot continue. Can one find that out for oneself as one lives with it and watches at the same time? The energy in awareness, not in the goal of overcoming anxiety, then it's a split affair again, a fragmented thing. I don't know what the goal is, but I want to find out what anxiety is as it arises, and sit still with it and walk quietly with it. And maybe get a glimpse of it as I'm in a humdrum of activity. It's still there. Can I listen to it? Hear its beat? And catch the thought that just fed it again about yesterday and tomorrow. So that there is a moment-to-moment learning about what is going on now. we will end here for today.